The movie presents a dystopian future where society is governed by strict rules of conduct. The enforcement of this ruthless law is carried out by a specialized force composed of individuals whose minds have been altered. Dressed in metallic outfits, they act with unwavering dedication to their duty, resembling robotic police officers. They show no mercy, not even to their own family members. We then see a man named Rhett entering a house where a television blares loudly to an empty room. Rhett appears to have a purpose, as he immediately begins searching for something upon entering. Suddenly, he witnesses a man being shot in the head and falling dead to the ground. As Rhett investigates further, he hears a noise from another room and discovers a woman, bloodied and in a state of shock. Rhett quickly realizes she matches a description of a person in a photo he carries. However, before he can question her, she flees in fear, mistaking him for a government official. As Rhett follows her outside, he sees that she has been apprehended by the militant police officers. Rhett understands the gravity of her situation. There is no escape from the officers' ruthless judgment. In a futile attempt to help, Rhett is pushed to the ground and helplessly watches as the officers execute the woman before his eyes. In a parallel scene, a man named Pierce is shown moving his belongings into an office desk, signaling a job transfer. Jean, Rhett's biological sister, works in the same office. Upon arriving at work, she heads to the room occupied by Pierce, expecting to greet her friend Catherine, who previously used the office. Confused and surprised by Pierce's presence, Jean inquires about Catherine. Pierce, after a brief pause, somberly informs her that Catherine has passed away just a few minutes earlier. Jean, processing the shocking news, leaves with a visibly disturbed expression. The narrative intensifies as Rhett is taken into custody by the militant police officers at the scene of Catherine's death. He is brought to the central authority responsible for enforcing the stringent laws of this dystopian society. In an interrogation room, Rhett faces a higher official who seems to recognize him, hinting at a previous acquaintance between them. The official reads aloud the charges against Rhett, accusing him of aiding a person labeled as defective and attempting to attack a police officer. The officer is described as a guardian of public peace and benefit, making Rhett's actions a serious violation. Rhett passionately defends himself, arguing that his intentions were purely to save a life and that such actions should not be considered a crime. The official, however, is moved by his plea and informs him that he is no longer permitted to work at his current job. Instead, he will be reassigned to a different branch. Rhett is then released to pack his belongings, with the warning that police officers will soon arrive to escort him to his new assignment. Meanwhile, Pierce, who works with Rhett's sister Jean, attempts to forge a friendlier relationship with her. During a break, he approaches Jean's desk and invites her to join him for a cup of coffee at a nearby restaurant. As they converse, they formally introduce themselves, getting to know each other better. The conversation takes a sudden turn when Pierce openly criticizes the ruling party's strategies for handling criminal acts. As he lights a cigarette, Jean becomes visibly anxious upon noticing a police mutant, an enforcer of the stringent laws, standing nearby. Jean's fears soon materialize when a militant police officer approaches them. The officer demands that Pierce hand over all his cigarettes, citing a law that prohibits smoking in public spaces. Pierce, rather than complying, challenges the officer, claiming there are no signs or warnings against smoking in the area. In response, the officer cites the specific article that prohibits such behavior and sternly instructs Pierce to surrender his cigarettes within 10 seconds, starting a countdown. Jean watches the tense exchange with growing anxiety. Pierce hesitantly hands over his entire pack of cigarettes, including the one in his mouth, just in time to avoid a violent escalation. The officer leaves, and Jean exhales in relief. Following this incident, they return to the office. Back at the office, Jean faces a stern reprimand from her superior. She is admonished to stay attentive and focused on survival, with a stark reminder of the tragic fate that befell her friend Catherine. Jean is then handed a document to work on. As she reviews the document, Jean stumbles upon something that sparks an idea about the identity of the person she is investigating. Rhett, also known as Sean, is in the midst of packing up his belongings, preparing to leave his apartment under the strain of the oppressive regime. His packing is interrupted by an unexpected knock at the door. Opening it, Rhett is both startled and relieved to find his younger sister Jean standing there. The siblings share an emotional moment as they reunite after a long separation, but the reunion quickly turns bittersweet as Jean, unable to contain her frustration and anger, chastises Rhett for leaving her to face the harsh realities of their world alone. Rhett attempts to calm her, but Jean's pain is palpable as she tearfully recounts the struggles she has endured in his absence. Their emotional exchange is abruptly disrupted by the arrival of a militant police officer at the apartment. The officer announces that he has come to take Rhett away. In a desperate attempt to keep her brother with her, Jean pleads with Rhett, calling him by his real name, Sean, and begging him not to abandon her again. The officer, impatient and indifferent to their plight, begins a countdown to execute Rhett if he refuses to comply. In a daring act of defiance, Jean strikes the officer from behind, risking a death sentence in a desperate bid to protect her brother. Seizing the moment, Rhett takes Jean's hand and they flee. In their escape through the building's corridors, they encounter another militant police officer. In a life-or-death struggle, they manage to defend themselves and eliminate the threat posed by the officer. Meanwhile, the news of the siblings' actions quickly reaches the Central Control Unit. Their photographs are circulated across the internet, labeling them as wanted criminals. Pierce, who is casually waiting in a cafe for his food, receives a notification on his phone displaying the siblings' photos. Recognizing them, he abruptly leaves the cafe in a rush. Later that night, Jean and Rhett find refuge in a seemingly safe, open space. They approach the owner of the establishment, who appears relaxed and unconcerned. Unaware of the gravity of their situation, Jean and Rhett engage the owner in conversation. He nonchalantly hands them a key to an upper room. But as soon as they head upstairs, the owner reveals his true intentions. He covertly activates an emergency button and discreetly places a tracking device under the table, effectively reporting Jean and Rhett's location to the authorities. Jean and Rhett, hiding in a makeshift shelter, find themselves engulfed in a heated argument about their past. Jean expresses her deep disappointment and sense of abandonment, pointing out that Rhett looks nothing like her brother Sean, whom she remembers. Amidst the emotional exchange, she inquires about their next move. Rhett responds with a sense of urgency, informing her that they need to leave immediately. However, their plan is thwarted when they realize they have been surrounded by agents from the Central Unit, as indicated by the noises outside their hideout. Rhett quickly formulates a plan to escape through the smoke deployed by the Central Unit, designed to render them unconscious. He instructs Jean not to inhale as much as possible to avoid its effects. In their desperate attempt to escape, they engage in a violent confrontation with the police militants. Although they manage to eliminate some of their assailants, the chaos leads to them being separated. In a dramatic turn of events, Rhett, while trying to escape, is shot in the stomach and collapses. In the nick of time, he is rescued by a mysterious figure who eliminates the militant threatening Rhett, saving him from further harm. Meanwhile, Jean, struggling to navigate through the dense smoke and fighting for breath, encounters the owner of the space hiding under a table. She pleads with him for help. Before they can make their escape, the Central Unit arrives and captures them, executing the owner on the spot. Back at the Central Control, a ruthless directive comes from Breakridge, the orchestrator of the oppressive regime, to execute Jean. However, Miss Green, a high-ranking official, disobeys the order and instead takes Jean to the control space alive for reasons yet unknown. Rhett regains consciousness, feeling intense pain from his gunshot wound. He finds himself in the care of Pierce, who, with a sense of urgency, removes the bullet from Rhett's side. As he administers first aid, Pierce introduces himself and reveals that they have been collaboratively working to dismantle the brutal company SAS. Rhett, recalling that Jean has been captured, is determined to rescue her. However, Pierce expresses doubt about her chances of survival now that she is in the hands of the merciless company. Despite this, he shares his plan with Rhett to bring down the entire system by targeting the Central Unit. The climax reaches a fever pitch as Rhett, driven by desperation and love for his sister, heads to the Central Unit, enduring excruciating pain from his injuries. His mission: to rescue Jean from the clutches of the oppressive regime. Meanwhile, Jean undergoes a harrowing ordeal as the authorities implant chips in her neck, gradually altering her mind. She is confined in a gruesome space, witnessing the brutal treatment of other captives. Rhett, displaying remarkable resilience, overcomes the militants guarding the facility and locates Jean just in time before the authorities can inflict further harm on her. Jean, however, is barely recognizable, her mind altered by the chips. Rhett gently calms her down, providing a moment of solace amidst the chaos. Their escape is fraught with danger as police officers close in on them. In a tense turn of events, a drone tracks Rhett and Jean as they flee the facility. Rhett's injury exacerbates, forcing him to stop, unable to continue. Jean, despite her lack of experience with firearms, steps up and takes the gun from Rhett. With his guidance, she manages to shoot down the drone in a dramatic display of courage and determination. However, their ordeal is far from over. Mrs. Green arrives unexpectedly and, to their surprise, shoots her own associate, who is about to report their location to Breckenridge. In this moment of confusion, Pierce reveals himself, aligning with Mrs. Green. Together, they persuade Rhett to join their cause in dismantling the entire oppressive system. Rhett agrees to collaborate. Meanwhile, the chips implanted in Jean are fully activated, causing her to transform into a militant-like figure, similar to the police officers they've been evading. In the final scenes, Rhett, Jean, and their newfound allies breach the control unit of the system. Jean, now completely under the influence of the chips, begins to act like the police militants. She turns against everyone in the room, including Rhett, recalling his transgressions as dictated by the system. After a tense moment of hesitation, Jean fires her gun at Rhett just as the system explodes, causing a chain reaction that liberates all the police mutants from their controlled state. As they remove their helmets, regaining their sense of self, the movie concludes with one of the militants asking Jean for help. Jean, in a moment of regained clarity and independence, responds with a definitive no.